Ah, who would have thought the room of requirement would be this dusty? Oh, if only old Deke the house elf were still alive. But Quentin Pendragon has succeeded in his quest, because this is no ordinary sixth-year potions textbook. What I hold in my hands, my dear wizards, witches, muggles, and squibs, is none other than the rarest of copies, belonging to the mysterious Half-Blood Prince. Ah, Severus Snape. A name that conjures up secrets, intrigue, and potions so powerful they would make even the most skilled potioneer pale in comparison. Within these pages lie the secrets Snape guarded for years. But Quentin Pendragon, your beloved, charming adventurer wizard, is here to reveal them all. For Snape chose to live in the shadows, enduring the unbearable, all for the love of a woman. And his story deserves to be told and remembered. Always. Sectum Sempra.
Quentin, what have you done?
Oopsie daisy.
Like many great stories in the wizarding world, this one also begins with an important pure blood legacy. The Prince family. It was 1930 when Eileen, the eldest daughter, was born. Although no details are certain, it seems that Eileen grew up in a hostile environment, despite her family's wealth. Her father and relatives had hoped desperately for a male heir, a hope her mother had not been able to fulfill. While the world was engulfed in the global wizarding war, led by the dark wizard Gellert Grindelwald, Eileen, like every young witch of her age, began attending Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, where she was presumably sorted into Slytherin House. Despite her excellent magical abilities, Eileen struggled to make many friends during her school years, partly due to the introversion developed in her childhood and partly due to her fascination with the dark arts. In general, other students saw Eileen as both dangerous and odd, a sentiment reinforced by her passion for Hogwarts' least popular extracurricular activity, gobstones. This ancient wizarding game resembles Muggle marbles, except that each time a player loses a point, the winning stone sprays a foul-smelling liquid onto the loser's face. Eileen's enthusiasm for the game was so great that she became captain of the school Gobstones team in her 5th year, as well as serving as president of the Hogwarts Gobstone Club. Years passed, and with the end of school came the end of the small world the young witch had built for herself, a world of her own, far from home and her father's hatred. It's unclear what exactly happened, but it's likely that after graduating, she left her family and found a job in the Muggle world to escape their control. It was then, after moving to the Midlands of England, that she met Tobias Snape,
Hello.
a young man who was exceptionally kind to her.
My name is Tobias.
A Muggle.
Eileen.
Perhaps enchanted by an affection she had never known before, Eileen unexpectedly fell in love. Months passed, as did seasons, until the two decided to wed. Her choice to marry a Muggle-born man may have led to her being disowned by the Prince family, much like Andromeda Tonks, who was cast out by the House of Black for the same reason. Due to Tobias's working-class job, they were forced to move from the countryside to Spinner's End, a shabby suburb of Copeworth, near a dirty river and full of dilapidated houses, disused factories, and broken-down street lamps. Life was not easy there. Tobias's factory job brought in meager wages, and Eileen struggled to find work in that world, feeling out of place and beginning to harbor a faint but growing resentment toward Muggles. Likewise, Tobias began to resent her for her passivity. Things worsened when Eileen unexpectedly became pregnant with an unwanted child.
I want to keep it.
Despite her husband's opposition, the witch chose to keep the baby. Perhaps her son would be her salvation from that meaningless reality. And so, in January 1960, Severus Snape was born. The boy, just like his mother before him, grew up in a world devoid of paternal affection. Tobias, who had started drinking during those years and was becoming increasingly aggressive, hated the little brat, who, in his view, had ruined his life. Severus's childhood was plagued by the tumultuous, explosive atmosphere in the home, with his parents often fighting. Tobias would shout at Eileen and may have been physically abusive as well. The witch, despite her initial longing for motherhood, grew increasingly depressed, and as time went on, she struggled to show much affection toward the child, neglecting him more and more.
Mom?
While some magical scholars believe that psychological stress during early childhood can lead to the repression of one's magical powers, it is also theorized that the opposite effect can occur. Perhaps for this reason, young Severus, long before his 10th birthday, began to show an exceptional aptitude for magic, demonstrating a natural talent like no other. It is likely that Eileen, noticing her son's incredible abilities, began secretly teaching him out of her husband's sight, as Tobias had never truly understood or known much about their magical nature.
We'd have to talk.
Thus, young Severus, even before receiving his acceptance letter to Hogwarts, had already learned high-level spells and secrets of the dark arts. It would therefore come as no surprise when Sirius Black later claimed that Snape, when he arrived at school, knew more hexes than half of the 7th-year students. In addition to this, the child soon demonstrated a remarkable ability in legilimency, a rare skill that allowed him to navigate the intricate layers of another person's mind and emotions. A wizard who practiced this art was known as a legilimens, capable of uncovering thoughts, secrets, and feelings hidden deep within others. It was during a summer of those gray and difficult years in Spinner's End that Severus happened to notice a girl of his own age who lived nearby, just a few steps from the neighborhood, catching his attention. After watching her for some time, Severus noticed her evident magical abilities, and it was then that he gathered the courage to approach her. The girl, he discovered, was named Lily Evans.
My name's Lily.
It didn't take long for the two of them to become more than just great friends. Almost inseparable despite the hostility from Lily's older sister, Petunia, who on several occasions had tried to discourage her from associating with that poor boy who dresses like a ragamuffin. But Severus and Lily, together, had found in their friendship a place where they could take refuge without feeling different or wrong. Their bond grew even stronger the day they both received their acceptance letters to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry.
What's this?
And so, on September 1st, 1971, Severus and Lily finally arrived at King's Cross Station in London to board the Hogwarts Express. During the journey to the castle, the two friends had the opportunity to meet two other first-year students who were anything but friendly, James Potter and Sirius Black. The two began to pick a fight with Severus over a difference of opinion about which house at Hogwarts was the best to be sorted into. Severus, proud of his mother Eileen's heritage, strongly defended the value of Slytherin, a house that had hosted some of the most exceptional wizards in magical history, like Merlin. The two responded by saying that only dark wizards end up in Slytherin.
Nice nose.
They began mocking him for his nose,
Leave him alone.
while Lily tried unsuccessfully to defend him. That first hostile encounter on the train would lay the foundations for an antagonism that would define the fate of the four for the rest of their lives, a destiny that continued to unfold that very first evening at the castle during the sorting ceremony. While Severus, as expected, was sorted into Slytherin with little hesitation from the hat, he had never imagined the possibility that his best friend Lily would be taken from him when she was sorted into Gryffindor. Seeing her smile at the same table as those two jerks from the train, Severus once again felt in that moment more alone than ever in his life. From his first year, Severus excelled in defense against the dark arts, thanks to his innate talent and the knowledge passed down from his mother Eileen. He also proved to be an exceptional potions master, probably the best student of his year, alongside Lily, with whom he remained a close friend, despite being sorted into different houses. However, unlike Lily, whose talent was immediately noticed by the clever and ambitious Professor Slughorn, always on the lookout for promising young students, who invited her to join the exclusive Slug Club, Severus remained in the shadows at Hogwarts, despite his objectively exceptional abilities. Just like his mother, Severus was an introverted young man who struggled to socialize and make friends, preferring to spend more time with books and scrolls rather than drinking butterbeer at the Three Broomsticks, like that herd of sheep This tendency towards introversion, masked as an overt sense of superiority and disdain towards his peers, especially Muggles, only strengthened the contrast and rivalry between him and James Potter, who, along with Sirius Black and two other Gryffindors, Remus Lupin and Peter Pettigrew, had become the most popular and arrogant quartet in all of Hogwarts, the Marauders. Potter, the typical popular and arrogant student, took great pleasure in mocking Severus publicly, often calling him Snivelous Snape. Thankfully, Lily, despite sharing the same Gryffindor house, could not condone his behavior. James's egotism and cruelty in tormenting Severus were, in her eyes, completely unacceptable. It was during these years that Severus Snape, almost playfully, began to develop the idea of a new identity, a secret one, the Half-Blood Prince. A pseudonym that, of course, refers to his magical bloodline, the one from his mother, Prince. An interesting and curious parallel to another Slytherin, Tom Marvolo Riddle, both eager to create a new name, a new identity to hide behind, so they could rid themselves of their Muggle heritage, the part of themselves they could never face each time they looked in the mirror, their fathers. As the Half-Blood Prince, Severus secretly began experimenting with magic, altering spells, enhancing their effects, and even creating entirely new ones, curses mostly. Levicorpus, which grabbed the victim by the ankle and dangled them upside down. Muffliato, which filled the ears of anyone nearby with an unidentifiable buzzing sound. And then there was Langlock, Liberacorpus, and another hex that caused toenails to grow at an unnaturally fast rate. In addition to the spells, meticulously recorded by Severus in his copy of Advanced Potion Making, he had, of course, perfected the procedures for several potions present in the textbook, enhancing their effects. Among these were the Draught of Living Death, the Poison Antidote, and the Elixir to Induce Euphoria. Much can be said about Severus Snape, but nothing will ever change the fact that to accomplish what he did, he was undoubtedly a genius of magic. But of all his creations, there is one that is as brutal as it is lethal.
Sectum Sempra.
Sectum Sempra, a curse that tore apart its target and caused severe bleeding. So dreadful that many considered it, though unofficially, to be the fourth unforgivable curse. Blood spurted from Malfoy's face and chest, as though he had been slashed with an invisible sword. He staggered backward and collapsed onto the waterlogged floor with a great splash, his wand falling from his limp right hand. Slipping and staggering, Harry got to his feet and plunged toward Malfoy, whose face was now shining scarlet, his white hands scrabbling at his blood-soaked chest.
Hello, my dear wizards, witches, muggles, and squibs. I'm Quentin Pentagran, and today I have some exciting news for you. The Ministry of Magic is looking for new talent to expand the content and formats of the Spellbook Chronicles. We're searching for a witch, or even a muggle or squib, eager to join our team. These are the qualities we're looking for. An in-depth knowledge of the wizarding world. Yes, you need to be a Potterhead. And impeccable English, either native or perfectly fluent. It's essential to have good acting and communication skills in front of the camera, as well as your own equipment to film yourself independently. If you think you've got what it takes, send us your application. For once, it's better not to use an owl, but rather Muggle technology. Write to us at spellbook@trianglefilms.com. And why not send us a video introduction as well? Remember, presentation matters, so make sure you perfect every detail. I can't wait to see your talent. May the magic be with you, and let the applications begin.
It is highly likely that Snape, not only for pleasure and pure ambition, conceived many of his curses as a defense against the constant attacks from the Marauders. Indeed, the group never missed an opportunity to pick a fight or mock him under the guidance of Patricia Rakepick, a fifth-year student known for her cunning and her propensity for breaking the rules. Thus, Severus began to take pleasure in trying to thwart, by any means possible, the endless pranks of Patricia and the Marauders. One night, while following Patricia, he discovered her obsessive search for the Cursed Vaults, 5 legendary hidden rooms at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, each vault shielded by a different curse placed upon it. Some alleged that the vaults housed priceless treasures, such as gold, prophecies, and other powerful magical artifacts dating back to before the school was founded, while others believed they contained dark magic. Their origin is uncertain, and it is possible they predated the founding of the school. But for many, this was nothing more than a legend. Certainly not for Patricia, who, when presenting her theory on the real existence of the cursed vaults, was dismissed. Young Snape, however, was not so certain of this judgment. Seeing her as uncommonly ambitious for a Gryffindor, and he recognized far from stupid, he eventually began to question her motives and intentions regarding the vaults, ultimately perceiving her as a threat to the school and everyone within the castle. A mystery that Snape would only solve many years later as a potions master. But that is another story for another day. As a result of these events and Patricia's involvement, the rivalry between Snape and the Marauders became even more intense. It was in this context that Severus began to associate with some of his fellow Slytherins, including Bellatrix Black, Rodolphus Lestrange, Evan Rosier, Avery, Mulciber, and Wilkes. In the Slytherin common room, the group would spend many nights debating the supremacy of purebloods and the inferiority of Muggleborns, fantasizing about a utopian world and the victory of the Dark Lord, who would turn the tide of the wizarding world once the war was won. Among these Slytherins, one in particular took Severus under his wing, earning him great respect. A fifth-year prefect, Lucius Malfoy, scion of his noble house. Due to his new associations, the relationship between Severus and Lily began to deteriorate more and more. One day, a Gryffindor from their year, Mary McDonald, was brutally harassed by Mulciber, a pure-blood Slytherin and future Death Eater. Although it is unknown exactly what Mulciber intended to do to Mary or why he targeted her, it is likely due to her Muggle-born status. Later, during his trial, Igor Karkaroff claimed that Mulciber specialized in the Imperious Curse, which could suggest that Mary fell victim to something of that nature. When Lily heard about the incident, she believed it proved that Mulciber had a creepy and evil, perverse sense of humor. However, in response to his friend's words, Severus merely dismissed the incident, describing it as just a laugh.
It was a laugh.
Lily could sense that something was changing in Severus. The solitude and repressed anger were turning him into someone she no longer recognized. One afternoon in the spring of their 5th year, Severus was engrossed in reading, sitting quietly by the shore of the Black Lake. Suddenly, James Potter and the Marauders appeared, furious over yet another tip-off from Snape to the caretaker Argus Filch. Severus barely had time to react.
Levicorpus!
James shouted, using one of the spells created by the half-blood prince. The spell turned Severus upside down, exposing his underwear and humiliating him in front of numerous students, including Lily.
Stop it.
She stepped in to defend Severus, but this only made things worse. In an attempt to regain his dignity, Severus, humiliated and angry, lashed out at James, and, in a moment of reckless fury, called Lily a filthy mudblood, deeply wounding her. This would forever be Severus's worst memory.
Just like him.
That evening, Mary McDonald heard about Severus's plan to spend the night outside the entrance to Gryffindor Tower, waiting to apologize to Lily for calling her such a hurtful name. She quickly informed her friend, who despite her still raw pain, forced herself to leave the dormitory to meet her once close companion. When Lily finally appeared, Severus's heart leapt with hope. He didn't waste a second, pleading for her forgiveness, desperately trying to explain himself. But Lily's eyes were filled with hurt, and before she could even think of forgiving him, there was something she had to know.
Is it true?
Quietly, she asked him if it was true,
Severus.
if he truly planned to join the Death Eaters, to serve the Dark Lord once they left school. Severus paused, the weight of her question heavy in the silence that hung between them. He searched for an answer, something that might lessen her disappointment, but in the end, he couldn't bring himself to deny it. His silence spoke louder than any excuse he could muster. In that moment, Lily's expression changed. The sadness in her gaze shifted to something resolute, as though she was seeing him clearly for the first time. She realized that no matter how much she had tried to reach him, no matter how many years they had shared as friends, Severus couldn't or wouldn't change the path he had chosen, even for her. A tear slipped down her cheek, and she turned away, her heart heavy. For Lily, this was the end.
Goodbye.
Their friendship, once so deep, was over.
Severus.
The days at Hogwarts passed, as grey as they had always been at Spinner's End. It was by chance that Severus one day, intrigued by Remus Lupin's monthly disappearances, witnessed Madame Pomfrey taking the boy to the Shrieking Shack during a full moon through a secret passage beneath the Whomping Willow. But Sirius Black, eager for revenge, since he and James had lost their spots on the Gryffindor Quidditch team due to Severus's incident at the Black Lake, took advantage of Severus's curiosity and, as a joke, told him that the trick to getting past the Whomping Willow was to poke the knot at its base. The boy, following Sirius's instructions innocently, was nearly at the Shrieking Shack when James pulled him back just in time. At great personal risk, James saved Severus from certain death at the hands of Remus in his werewolf form. However, Severus stubbornly refused to believe that his old rival had acted out of goodwill, assuming instead that Potter had saved him only to avoid expulsion, and he loathed the idea of being indebted to him.
I must ask.
Albus Dumbledore swore Severus to secrecy, but now Severus understood the true nature of Remus.
I will.
By their 7th year, James Potter had shed much of his immaturity and arrogance, becoming someone Lily could finally see herself with. After years of resistance, she agreed to start dating him. Yet despite his growth, James's animosity towards Severus remained as fierce as ever. Sirius often remarked that Severus had always been a special case for James, a rivalry that ran deeper than any ordinary schoolboy grudge. However, Severus's continued associations with students who were either sympathizers or outright supporters of the Dark Lord didn't help his already strained relationship with the Marauders, or with Lily, for that matter. As James and her relationship blossomed, Severus's bitterness only deepened.
Ah, there you are, my beloved viewers. Fear not, I'll be quicker than a golden snitch. First of all, I want to thank you all for being here for this episode of the Spellbook Chronicles. And if you think Quentin Pendragon is charming enough to deserve your generous support, you might consider leaving a like. And I highly recommend subscribing to the channel too, clicking the bell icon to make sure you don't miss a single episode. And why not, joining the channel to get priority access to every new video for just a couple of galleons. So, what are you waiting for?
The years at Hogwarts came to an end, and a new chapter awaited the young witches and wizards. The First Wizarding War was in full swing, and soon, everyone in the magical community would have to make their choice. As expected, Severus chose the path toward darkness, marking the beginning of his descent into Voldemort's ranks.
Severus.
He was branded with the Dark Mark, officially becoming a Death Eater. Meanwhile, Lily and James, now fully immersed in the war as members of the Order of the Phoenix, found solace in each other. Their bond, forged in the midst of the war, blossomed into love, and they married in a quiet ceremony. Not long after, their joy was complete with the birth of a son, Harry. Although Severus's actions as a Death Eater remain largely shrouded in mystery, it's clear that he quickly rose to prominence within Voldemort's inner circle. His most pivotal moment came when he unknowingly provided the Dark Lord with a piece of crucial information, one that would ultimately change the course of the war and the fate of all involved. Sybil Trelawney, just over 20 and desperately seeking employment, encountered Albus Dumbledore in Hogsmeade at the Hogshead Inn, where she was residing in hopes of securing the position of Professor of Divination at Hogwarts. Although Dumbledore had no intention of continuing the subject at the school, he decided to offer her a chance due to her lineage. Unfortunately, Sybil demonstrated a complete lack of talent in the art of divination,
I'm so sorry.
prompting Dumbledore to decline her request. Yet, against all odds, she entered a genuine trance at that moment and made a fateful prophecy.
The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies, and the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal. But he will have power the Dark Lord knows not, and either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord will be born as the 7th month dies.
That day, Severus found himself at the Hog's Head Inn and overheard only part of the prophecy before Aberforth Dumbledore caught him eavesdropping and promptly threw him out.
Get out!
The Death Eater wasted no time in informing Voldemort, who became immediately obsessed with the idea of preventing what had been foretold. At that time, 2 infants could have been the subject of the prophecy: Harry Potter, the half-blood son of James and Lily Potter, and Neville Longbottom, the pure blood son of Frank and Alice Longbottom. Both families had sought to thwart Voldemort 3 times and were members of the Order of the Phoenix. Both children were born at the end of July. But which one?
The boy.
After much contemplation,
It has to be
Voldemort made the mistake
Potter.
of choosing young Potter. Severus knew all too well what that would mean.
It can't be.
Lily would die, and her son along with her. This couldn't happen. It must not happen. Despite the darkness of those final years, Severus had never truly let go of his love for that smiling girl with the red hair. The only person in the world who had ever been able to bring light into his gray, dreary sky. Severus begged Voldemort to spare her, and the Dark Lord reluctantly agreed.
I beg you,
However, knowing
my
that he
lord.
could not trust anyone else to protect Lily, especially someone as capricious as Voldemort, who might change his mind on a whim, and understanding that Lily would likely fight to the death to protect her child, Severus made his choice. He decided to abandon the Dark Lord for good,
Sir.
and went to Albus Dumbledore,
Please.
desperate to ask for his help in saving her.
Save her.
He pleaded with him to hide Lily,
I will.
along with her husband and son,
And
if
what
he
will
had
you
to.
give me in return?
The old wizard agreed, but insisted
Severus.
that Severus serve him as a spy among the Death Eaters.
Anything.
Despite Dumbledore's best efforts to protect the Potters, Peter Pettigrew, one of James's closest friends, betrayed them by tipping off their location. On the night of October 31st, he arrived at Godric's Hollow and cast the killing curse first on James, then on Lily, who bravely shielded her son. Yet, despite the tragic loss, it was Lily's sacrifice and indirectly Severus's actions that led to the Dark Lord's downfall. Severus's plea had allowed Lily to make the ultimate choice, to die for Harry. This act of selflessness ensured that the curse backfired, leaving her son with the means to survive, while Voldemort's body was destroyed, paving the way for his eventual defeat. After Lily's death, Snape was consumed by grief, his sorrow so deep that he wished for nothing more than to join her in death. The world felt empty, and the weight of his decisions crushed him. But Dumbledore, seeing the fragile state Snape was in, implored him to focus on something greater than his pain:
Severus,
Harry's safety.
please.
It was the least Snape could do in honor of Lily's memory. At first, Snape was reluctant, convinced that the danger had passed. With the Dark Lord vanquished, he thought surely the threat was over. But Dumbledore knew better. He warned Severus that Voldemort's fall was not the end. The Dark Lord would return, and when he did, everyone, especially the boy, would be in grave danger. Reluctantly, Snape understood. Harry's fate, and perhaps the entire wizarding world's, rested on a thread, and he had a role to play in keeping that thread from snapping. So Severus spent the rest of his life protecting Lily's child, Harry Potter, who was often said to strongly resemble James. Distrusted by those on Albus Dumbledore's side for his past as a Death Eater, and hated by his former allies, he became a silent guardian,
Severus.
his loyalty to Lily and her son unwavering,
Protect him.
even as he remained a man torn between 2 worlds, never fully accepted by either, but bound by a sense of duty to protect the boy who carried her legacy.
Well, my dear friends, another journey through potions, spells, and secrets has come to an end. But don't let the Floo powder take you too far away. And stay tuned, because there's always a new charm waiting to be uncovered. I, Quentin Pentagrin, your favorite adventure wizard, will see you in the next exciting episode of the Spellbook Chronicles.